Good morning, guys. Dylan from Kalama Performance Australia here with Dave Kalama in Hawaii. I'm pretty stoked to be back here again and catching up with Dave and downwinding. It's been a fun 4 days for me so far, Malika every day. But what I want to cover today is a bunch of questions I've got from the Instagram viewers and customers about the Barracuda boards that are coming into the US, Hawaii, Japan, Australia in just a couple of weeks. So Dave's going to cover all those questions and we're just going to go through a couple of things and talk about the CUDA. But first I want to say thanks for making the CUDA.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And firstly, when was the first Barracuda? The idea, when was it? And probably how many prototypes have you made to get to what we're going to see soon?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say the first Barracuda was at least 4 years ago, at least. And there's been multiple variations. I mean, when you say Barracuda, the whole concept really started with prone downwinding. And that was because not too long after learning how to foil, I was such an adamant downwinder, OC1, OC2, stand-up, six-man canoe, whatever. Just, I loved everything I could ride downwind. And so, naturally, as soon as I learned how to foil, it was let's go take it downwind and ride the swells. And it was amazing. But I very quickly realized that at that point, the largest growth population within foiling was the proners. And in its current form at that point, several years ago, several years ago, proning was never going to have access to downwinding. And everybody that was doing stand-up did. And so I made it my mission at that point, if I can figure out how to make downwinding accessible to the prone guys, then they'll get a taste of how amazing this part of the sport is. And to me, it was one of the best parts of the whole thing. I mean, riding waves is amazing, don't get me wrong. It's the ultimate, right? But downwinding is almost the same. It's like riding a wave for miles or kilometers on kilometers, you know?
Yeah. And I think I explained that this morning to Carla was the whole downwinding thing, and more people want to get into it. You're in your bubble, like yesterday, right? And you were, it was what, 5 or 6 of us in front of me. I could see 5 or 6 other people, all just cruising downwind, just surf. All we're doing is just surfing for 10 miles.
Yep.
And then we go back and we do it today and yesterday and every other day. So it's incredible. And so the Barracuda now allows more people to.
Yeah, I mean that was the genesis of the Barracuda. Was it called the Barracuda at that point? No, but the concept of what it became is the Barracuda.
Yeah.
It was to make the absolute most efficient, easiest thing I could create for downwinding, so that it was accessible to as many people as possible. Yeah. Now, along the way, we started to realize that these boards I was making for prone, because they were so much narrower, significantly narrower than any of the stand-ups at the time, I couldn't stand on them. But my son, Jeremy Riggs, Tomo, are light enough that they started standing on them, and all of a sudden became not a prone downwinder anymore, but just a downwinder.
Yeah. And
you choose how you want to ride it, or how you want to catch the wave, because the volume for proning and SUP downwinding essentially became the same thing.
Yeah.
They were one and the same. So it gave you the option to stand up or lay down. And then in the process of that evolution, it became obvious that the paddle would become way more important in the equation of stability and not the board. And the board had always been your source of stability. And when they got so narrow, the board couldn't manufacture that kind of stability anymore. But with a modification in your technique, utilizing your paddle more, now you can create stability with your paddle.
Yeah.
So that opened the door to going quite significantly more narrow. I mean, there's a lot of other things too. What kind of started it was realizing I was making boards for paddling out.
That's right. I remember this conversation we had. Yeah.
You know, because they had to be stable enough to get out of the mouth of Maliko, and it's so rough and turbulent. You can only make them so narrow. And then once I realized you don't have to stand up to get in position.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was a huge breakthrough of going, oh, just make a board for catching, not for getting out there. So little things like that, there was multiple things, all kind of added up to realizing that you could go much thinner than we thought we ever could. And that increased the efficiency of the design significantly.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of drawing upon all my experience throughout my career of what type of edges do this, and the rockers, and all the little components that don't meet the eye upon first seeing it, are way more important than you would ever think. And that importance changes at different velocities. Meaning, when you're down in the water and your board is acting as a displacement hull, the dynamics of all the design characteristics interact with the water much differently than when you're just about to break free of the water and you're nearly at planing speed, and now you're kind of required to take advantage of other design characteristics that release the water. So there's a lot more going on there that meets the eye initially.
So I guess we talked about Barracuda for downwinding then, but now what we've realised is you can surf it as well. Like I surf mine. I think it allows you to, well, realistically, you can prone paddle it and sup surf it. You can knee paddle it, whatever it takes to get up and going. But what it also allows you to do is go and surf breaks that no one else can surf, really, because you can get, because it has so much glide, you can get into the wave, up on foil, then ride that bump for as long as you can go. So it's the Barracuda, let's not, we'll box it into downwinding, it's whatever you want it for, right? I saw a video of a guy this morning, he winged on it, winged on it, out, deflated, and then sucked downwind.
Yep. So foiling is only referred to as foiling if you can get up on the foil.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's called paddling.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Right?
And we've had those experiences learning how to downwind.
We all have. While that concept seems grotesquely simple and obvious, I think it's really underestimated how important that is. Yeah. And there's such a defined, specific point at which you go from paddling to foiling, right? And the further away that point is from reaching it or having access to it, the harder it is to go foiling as opposed to paddling. And when I had that realization, it was like, okay, so the easier I can make it to get up on foil, to get the speed you need to get up on foil, the easier it is to get up on foil, and the more foiling you'll do and the less paddling you'll do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right? Totally obvious stuff.
Yeah.
But when everybody's riding 4-foot boards or 5-foot boards, they're really nice when you're up. Yeah. But they're making it much harder to get up.
Yeah, so like I ride a 4-6 prone at home and when I'm in the break and stuff. But if I had the opportunity to ride a Cuda and be on a break that doesn't break, I would get far more waves, and I always do have way more fun on a Barracuda because you're away from the crowd, there's no one there, you're riding wave no one else can ride, you're getting 3 compared to your 1 that you're battling the crowd on your prone board. No, I can't pump it back out and do 3 or 4 rounds as easy, but I don't need to because I'm getting the same wave count anyway.
Exactly. If you're riding a 4.6 or whatever it is, a tiny board, that you like the way it rides, fantastic. Keep riding it. I'm not saying the Barracuda is meant to replace anything.
Yeah.
It's meant to expand the possibilities of what can be done with foiling.
100%.
Right? And in the end, so much of what we do, especially in recreation or sport, is based on personal preference. And the personal preference is sort of predicated on criteria that we set up that we're trying to achieve. And if banging whitewaters and pumping around for half an hour are extremely valuable to you, then the criteria by which you're going to design your equipment is quite different than getting up on foil, catching open ocean swells, catching waves that never break, which are highly valuable to me.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's why I say it's not meant to replace anything else. It's meant to make downwinding more accessible, riding waves that never break more accessible, foiling more, essentially foiling more. And whatever that means to you, you can put the definition on it yourself.
Yeah.
But that point where you go from paddling to foiling is critical, because if you can't get over that specific point, then the rest of it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And also too, flat water paddle ups.
Flat water paddle ups.
That made it
Catching boat wakes.
Yeah, that one. What about dock starts?
Dock starts, light wind winging.
Yes, light wind winging.
You know, the whole thing, why it works so well is because it is literally the most efficient board on the market right now, period.
Yeah, 100%.
You know?
Yeah.
And efficiency equates to getting up on foil easier.
Yeah.
Which means foiling's fun. Now, I love paddling, but not if I'm going out foiling.
Yeah.
If I want to paddle, I'll go on my SUP or my one man or whatever it might be, where paddling's the goal. But when I go out on a foil, paddling's not the goal. Riding on a foil is. So.
Yeah. No, it's good. So we've kicked it off with that. I'm going to hit the questions now. We can keep it short or long, whatever it needs to be. One of the questions is, do the Barracudas only work in Maui? Where are the Barracudas and where are they going, I guess?
I mean, you asked, do the Barracudas only work in Maui? To me, I'm hearing, is foiling only fun in Maui?
Yeah, fair enough.
No.
Yeah.
Foiling's fun everywhere.
Everywhere, doesn't matter.
And so, the easier you make it to get up on a foil, then the Barracuda works for that. Whether you're in a little bay or Hood River or whatever, trying to do flat water starts. No, they are not just for Maui.
That answers that question. Well, and I can speak from it. I've got a Barracuda and Mick's got one as well, and we've used them in all up and down the East Coast so far. Flat water paddle ups at home. Downwinding, redhead to blacksmiths. Got off the water in 3 strokes on my first one, so that was pretty incredible. Surfing. I've proned it at Dixon Park where I live, so no, they're not just made for Maui, but we wanted to get the answer from you.
I mean, obviously they're tested in Maui, and everybody thinks, oh well, you know, I've heard the comments, or I've seen the comments. Oh, well, they work good on a Maliko, and Maliko's these giant rolling swells. Yeah, they work on Maliko, and yes, I test them constantly on a Maliko run.
Yeah.
But Maliko's not great every day.
No,
And we do go on days where, for most people, they might still consider it really good, but for us, it, 15 to 20, maybe up to 25, that's a lot slower than our normal day. And if you're familiar with Maui, you know that we have the Kihei side, which starts out literally in completely 100% flat water because the wind blows straight offshore, and the bumps grow as the wind builds them up. So, if anyone's going to have trouble getting going in really small bumps, it's me, because where my weight really helps me go fast in Maliko, it works against me on the Kihei side. And so I have plenty of opportunity to test the boards. And it was a concern of mine, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
The length, is it going to be touching the nose and the tail as you pump, and your bump's this big to get going, right?
They start tiny.
And yes, initially I did notice the tip and tail were touching, but I very quickly realized, oh, it's not the board, it's me. I just need to modify my technique a little bit. And yeah, you can't take as steep of an angle on your pump as you would, say, a 5-footer, but you can still pump, and you can still pump really efficiently.
Yeah.
And so by modifying the angles at which I pump the board at, the nose and tail stopped touching. What I didn't anticipate was that extra length creates more projection. So per pump, I was getting more projection forward and covering a greater distance per pump, which was kind of an unforeseen benefit that actually is quite helpful, you know? So yeah, it's for everywhere.
Yeah, and I can talk from experience with that. I've used my Barracuda Maliko in summer and winter, so I've seen the difference. And this week's swell has been like...
It's crazy.
I'll just talk about it real quick. The first one back was on Monday, and it was big. Like, forecast on windy was 3 meters of east swell and 35 knots of east wind. So you can imagine that stacked on top of each other. I was riding mountains of water. I will say I was pretty scared. And Tomo was in the trough in front of me and I couldn't see him. So that compared to the summer conditions we had, where it was not much swell and wind, and they worked perfectly fine. The pitch stability of the longer board, I find, is much nicer and easier on the body. But I've also used the Barracuda at Kihei, where it starts off like this big and gets to, waist high, and it's super fun. They fit in the bumps, you can turn, everything like that. I've done my ocean runs at home. I've done bay runs at home. Personally, for home, I would use my E3 for downwinding because the bumps are so tight. And I don't need the Barracuda there because I can get up on my E3 and I'm riding a bigger foil. Whereas I find the Barracudas, they allow you to ride a smaller, higher aspect foil. Because you've got the length to get the glide, to get the speed, to get those higher aspect, smaller foils up on foil. So then you can then chase and catch and ride those more energy, bigger swells. Is that sort of where it is? Like, I feel like in the bays you ride a E3. So I ride a 6.1 by 23, 105 litres with a 1770, because the 1770 matches the speed of the bump. Whereas in the ocean, we ride 1150s, 1000s, 850s, 1075s, whatever it is, because that foil matches the speed of the bump, but I need the Barracuda to get the glide, to get the thing on foil.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. It's weird because, like, in Hood River, I went last summer, and to your point, I normally use an 1150 or 1075. And I started out on the GT 1250, no, 1400. GT 1400. And because it was a real light day and the bumps were small. And then the next day, when the bumps got a lot bigger, I went down to a smaller wing, and I didn't like it as much because it was, like you said, it's too fast for those bumps, and it serves no purpose, or it doesn't make it any easier. Right? So I went back to the GT 1400, and in places like that, it's about surfing. It's
fun.
It's just more fun, and the low end's better, and so you can be more aggressive with your turns because it functions better at slower speeds, right? Which allows more aggression in slower turns, which is fun.
It's a different element. Like, here is like full focus. You're always full focus when you're downwind, but I find in those bay bumps, and yes, I've been to Hood River, but I haven't foiled it. Going this year, going to do the race this year, I'm pretty sure I'll try to 1770 because I'm not going to win, because the young guys will just be gunning it downwind. But to do the event and have fun,
Yep.
I would rather do the event, have fun, participate in it, come last, whatever.
Yeah.
But I get to ride downwind and be a part of the event rather than trying to get up on 1150 and swear my head off the whole way and not even making it and getting sucked out to Portland.
Yeah, I made that mistake last year of taking too small of a foil and paid dearly for it. It was really frustrating. So I learned my lesson. But yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of obvious at this point. You match the foil with the size of the bumps and the average speed you'll be going, and it equates to more fun.
Yeah, nice. So we spoke a little bit about who the Barracuda's for, but there's a comment I want to touch on that I've heard, and it's been brought up a couple of times. Is the Barracuda a beginner's board?
No, it's not. I don't know in what world a 19.5-inch wide board is considered a beginner's board. The concept is absurd, right? It's extremely difficult to stand on. Now, does it make downwinding easier? Yeah. If you didn't know that the Barracuda turns as well as it does, if you hadn't ridden one and you didn't realize how much more efficient they were, you might view it as a beginner board because it makes it easier, right? But not having ridden one, you wouldn't know that the turns are smoother. You create more projection in your pump. You create more projection in your turns, so your turns are faster. Because the board's more narrow, you can angle it more and create a more aggressive turn. If all those things are beginner characteristics, then yeah, maybe it is. But if you think that riding a shorter board that makes it harder to get up, that I don't know why you would, it's less efficient. They don't turn as well. They don't pump as well. And they're harder. So if that's advanced for you, ride an advanced board. But if you want a board that turns better, gets up on foil easier, is ultimately faster, I do believe, because of the projection that the length creates, it's easier. It's better.
In my eyes, it's created us to go downwind on higher aspect, smaller foils, but it's made that process easier. To the beginner board thing on flat water as well, it makes it easier, but that's not saying it's a beginner's board, right? It's just what you have done is you've created a board that makes it easier to stop paddling and start foiling, right? But it's not a beginner's board. I wouldn't put it in the beginner category.
No.
For downwind.
Most people equate beginner boards with length and stability. For SUP, for surfing, right? I could argue it takes more skill to ride a longer board. Really aggressively. And that a shorter board would be cheating. Because it, until now, has less swing weight and could pivot easier. And so if turning is your goal, I could go, well, a short one's kind of a beginner board because it's easy to turn with. Using the same logic.
Of course.
In reverse. Right?
Yeah.
So, it's your perception. It's your intention of arbitrary definition of a beginner board. I ride an 11-foot longboard a ton, and you could arguably say, oh, well, an 11-footer is definitely a beginner surfer board, right? Not the way I surf it.
Well, I ride the 10-foot sups.
Yeah.
I ride a beginner's board.
I think it takes more skill
Yeah.
to turn a board of that length
100%.
really well. And there's no faking it. Like you can't wiggle your way through an 11-foot longboard. You've got to engage the rail, which means you've got to use technique,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that technique and those skills are developed with a long period of surfing, right? Now, if the goal is just to catch a wave, then yeah, the 11-footer would be a good beginner board because it glides so well.
Yeah. So it does both.
But to ride it really well, I would argue it's the opposite of a beginner board.
Yeah. 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 So that covers a good topic. I'm going to mix these two together. Do the Kalama boards only work with GoFoil? Answers no. They don't only work with GoFoil.
No, they work with everything. Now, a couple years ago, my boxes were further back in the board, and you could make the argument that it were much more designed for GoFoil or Axis or any of the foils that tended to be further back. You know, to my knowledge, maybe there's other brands. It was really only Armstrong and Lift that needed that extra space further forward because you got to stand more behind the mast, right? Like everything, I've tried to evolve my designs to accommodate more brands and the varying needs that those equipment or those brands need, right? So with the Barracuda, the boxes are what I would say at least a couple inches further forward than they were maybe 2 years ago or a year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been the furthest back in the box of anyone that I ride with.
Yeah.
And so before, I used to like the concept of, well, I don't want to be at the very back of the box. I want to be able to adjust a little bit because we used to do a lot of testing, right? Now, it makes no sense to have any space left in the box behind me because no one ever rides further back in the box than me, right? So now with the Barracudas, the way I've set them up is that I'm pinned up against the back of the box, and so there's much more box out in front than there used to be, right? And with a lot of the masts, they have the extra set of holes to accommodate moving another 1.5 inches or 3 centimeters or whatever it is further forward or back to get that extra adjustment that you may need. So to answer your question, yes, they do work with the Armstrongs and the lifts. But you might be at the front of the box. But yeah, I've tried to make them so that they can accommodate everything.
Yeah, and there is customers that I know of here who are downwinding who have Armstrong and Lift on the other islands, and a couple of my customers at home, they ride Armstrong and Lift who have ordered the Barracuda. So it's, yeah, to answer the question, yes, they go with every brand, not just GoFoil and Axis and stuff like that.
And that was an evolution, you know. A couple of years ago, you could say, yeah, maybe they don't work so good for those other brands, but yes, they do now.
Yeah, cool. Okay, now the question we get is 10-inch boxes compared to 16-inch boxes, as in the length of the track mount in the board. I'm going to ask Dave what we're using in the Kalama. My understanding is you've R&D'd this board for now 4 years. And I've ridden many of them. It's perfectly balanced. In my eyes, I think the questions are coming from is maybe an inspired version of the board has the longer boxes because it allows other people to ride other brands and blah, blah, blah. Would I be wrong to say that those boards haven't been R&D'd like yours?
The Copycudas?
Yeah, Copycudas or whatever they are. Because the Copycudas are based on an image on Instagram.
Yep.
So they don't actually know about the secret sauce and all that. Like, maybe talk about the cake analogy.
Well, let me address the boxes first.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did order a set of those 16-inch boxes, And when I got them, pulled them out of the bag, and I wanted to see how strong they were. That was the first thing. And I grabbed each end and I twisted. And I could visibly see the box flexing. And I went, not for me. Combine that with a smooth and exterior under the board's surface, the part that's down in the board. It's a smooth surface all on the inside of it, right?
Yeah.
So preparation is critical to getting a chemical bond to a smooth surface.
Yeah.
With the boxes that I use, it's a dual bonding mechanism. Meaning, yes, there's the chemical bond of the epoxy, gluing it in, and then there's a mechanical bond because the boxes I use are corrugated, and so there's actually a mechanical bond created with that perforation on the box itself, as well as the epoxy creating the chemical bond on the box.
Yep.
So if I'm going to err towards anything, it's going to be towards durability and strength.
100%.
So that's why I went with the shorter boxes that are much stronger. Now, does it decrease the adjustability and the adaptability? Yes, it does. But that's really that's more of an issue if you don't know where stuff should go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I got friends that use lift, I've got friends that use Axis, me and a lot of my other buddies use GoFoil. So I had the opportunity in sharing these boards and testing them to have all my guys that I go downwinding with to try them, which means the other brands are having to go into them as well, which means I've got to figure out where those boxes can accommodate the most brands, right? And so ideally, I would like to have a little bit longer box. 11 or 12 would be all I need, and I could accommodate everything because the boxes are where they're supposed to be, right? But when you make it a choice between strength and durability or adjustability that may fail, I'm going to go with durability every time.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's why, that's why things are the way they are, or why I use the boxes I use.
Yep. Yep. Did you want to talk about your cake analogy? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but I can't remember. In what? Oh, the ingredients of the board.
Ingredients,
the total ingredients of the board.
So
yes.
So looking, going from an outside in, right? You created the recipe.
Right.
You created let's call it the board, the cake, whatever it is. You created it, right? And then someone's looked at it on the internet and went, oh, I can recreate that. But they don't, yeah, sure, they might have the ingredients, but they don't know when to put them in or why they go in, where they go in, or, yeah, that.
Well, I mean.
Well, they may know, but
a board
to
is,
recreate your board is what I'm saying.
A board is essentially a accumulation of design characteristics. There's the length, there's the width, there's the rail, the rocker, edges, outline, right? You could equate that to milk, eggs, flour, sugar, vanilla, whatever you want if you were making a cake, the cake analogy, right? Everybody can put different amounts of ingredients into their board. So if you see a cake on the table that's a chocolate cake, you're like, oh, all I need to do is take my normal recipe and add chocolate to it, and I can make a chocolate cake.
Yeah.
Right? And yeah, you probably will have something that tastes similar to chocolate.
Yeah.
But you got no idea how much salt I use, how much milk I use, how many eggs I use, right? Every aspect of the Barracuda has a tremendous amount of experience and history behind it. And having said that, there is no one right. Like this edge is the edge everything should have. No. Yeah. It depends on the speed. It depends on your design criteria, what your performance objectives are, right? And in essence, everything is a giant blend of compromises, because I can make the sharpest edge in the world running from tip to tail, but that wouldn't help. That would actually work against the performance of the board, right? So you tone it down in the places where it needs to be toned down. It's a compromised edge in essence, sharp in places where I believe it needs to be, softer in places I think it will make it work better. And you can take absolutely every aspect of design that goes into that board and know it has literally nothing to do with looks. It's completely based on personal experience functionality, right? Be it with longboards, canoes, jet skis, almost every craft that goes in the water that has a wide variety of velocities that it operates at. And my personal understanding of hydrodynamics, which is all practical experience, meaning me interacting with different designs in the water. I have no formal training. I didn't go to college and learn in a book how a rail works. You know what I mean? So I have a tremendous amount of practical experience or practical knowledge on what this type of rail, what this type of rocker, you know? And like I said, no one thing is right, because the velocity at which it's going to be used, there's just so many design performance characteristics and components that determine how your cake is going to taste ultimately. You put too much salt, it's going to taste salty, right? You over vanilla season it, it's going to taste very vanilla-y, right? So it's a matter of blending the right amounts and how they're going to interact with each other. How's the rocker going to change the rail, the outline, right? And getting all those components to enhance each other as opposed to work against each other. In the ultimate goal of efficiency, to make it easy to get up on foil.
Less time paddling.
Exactly.
That's what it goes back to. That answers that question. Will Dave ever downwind a shorter board than 8 foot again?
So I'm going to break that question up in two components. Will I ever use a shorter board again? Yes. Will it be under 8 foot? Not sure. Because your definition of a short board is probably different than my definition of a short board. Because I ride 11 and 12 footers so much, a 9 footer, I'm talking about surfing, longboarding, or stand up, right? A 9 foot longboard to me is a short board. I can literally throw it around like a 6.0 because I ride 11 and 12 so much. So it's drastically shorter. Now, someone asking me that question that rides 5.5s to 7s a lot, they're thinking a 9.0 is crazy long, right? And so it's your perspective. Longboards don't scare me. I love riding longboards. I love the characteristics that come with longboards. I like that long rail in surfing, and it creates a similar dynamic in foiling, even though the foils or the rail's not in the water. The projection and the speed that you get out of the turn of a longer board is like having a longer rail in the water in longboarding, right? I like that feeling. I get a buzz off of it. But I'm not saying you, Mr. 5'6" guy, have to like the same turn I like, right? There isn't one ultimate, this is the best, period. It's so much based on personal preference. Now, having said that, the efficiency side of it isn't personal preference. It's very measurable, right? It's very testable. It's very tangible. So in terms of efficiency, which is really an important factor in foiling because it equates to getting up off the water and getting onto foiling, right? It's less subjective. But the way things turn, the way they ride, is very much personal preference and your perspective on something, you know.
Yeah.
So shorter board, yeah. But in my process of developing equipment, I like to find out where the boundaries are, and then I can pull back and find out where the sweet spot is, right? But if I don't know where the boundary is, what too much is, like what too long is, or what too wide is, or what too short is, then you're playing in the middle of the road where it's safe. Maybe not literally if there's cars on the road, but from a design sense, you're following the middle of the path. Yeah. And nothing special ever happens in the middle. It happens out in the fray where you're discovering new things, right? And getting information that will help whatever it is you're designing, even if it is for something back in the middle, right? Yeah. And so, you know, I've heard it said, oh, Dave designs only in extremes.
Yeah, I haven't heard that.
Right? And it's a fair thing to say, but it's really a narrow-minded concept to think the fray is a bad place.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? No, you know, such and such makes a 10-footer, such and such makes an 8-footer, we should ride 9-footers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, middle ground.
Middle ground. Nice
safe.
and safe. Let's not get too crazy here. Bullshit. Get crazy.
Yeah.
Find out what too long is. Find out what too short is. Because you, staying in the middle of the road, are going to miss out on so much potential information and learning. And discovering and failing. Yeah. And failing can be just as important as discovering good information, right?
Yeah. Well, you don't learn unless you fail, right?
Exactly. And so, is it fair to say I design in extremes? Yeah, sure. But you better add, I've learned a lot more than the guys that are designing in the middle and trying to play it safe. Yeah. They're trying to sell as many boards as possible and not scare customers away. Yeah. I don't operate like that. Yeah. All right? Yeah. I am going to push the boundaries. Yeah. If that wasn't part of my makeup and some of the people that I run with, foiling wouldn't exist. No. Maybe it would, but it might be 10, 20 years down the line, right? Yeah. But because we have that open mind and we want to play outside the boundaries, we had an open mind to go get an air chair and try and stand up on it, and then once we figured out how to ride it, ride a wave on it. Yeah. You know, and that's happening. We're coming up on almost 30 years ago. Yeah. Not quite. Yeah. But it's that open-mindedness and that not being scared
to push the limits.
To push the limits.
So I'd be safe to say that from 30 years ago, when you and Laird and those guys, you basically founded surf foiling as such, created that because you weren't afraid to push the limits and go outside of the norm. Yep. And then same as with these things, you're the one who's pioneered the downwind foil board because you're not afraid to push the limit.
Yeah, I mean the Barracuda doesn't exist if I don't go past 6.6. Yeah. And at the time 6.6 seemed like, oh, you don't need to go any longer than that. That's, you know, the sky's gonna fall if you go past 6.6. Yeah. And there was a time where I kind of bought into that for a second, and then I was like, what am I doing? Yeah. Why am I allowing a fictitious boundary to block me from experimenting with no limits? Yeah. And so, forget any boundaries, forget any rules that encumber creativity. Try it. And maybe, if it's a total failure, you'll learn why the limit's 6.6. Yeah. But now it will be a real, perceived, learned, tested boundary, not one made up on false premises. Yeah. Right? Yeah. But thank God it didn't. 6.6 is not a boundary. It was only a limitation. Yeah. To being more creative and finding more efficiency and thinking outside the box and creating something that's significantly more efficient than anything that's come before it. Yeah. And if you question that and you think I'm speaking in hyperbole or over exaggerating, look at how many people are copying it. They're not copying it because it looks good.
It's functionality.
It's functionality.
Yeah.
I heard from a guy who got to try one. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So they copy it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now opens up a whole nother door of conversation that we don't need to go down right now. But the level at which the Barracuda is being copied, I would say, verifies every design aspect of it and its successfulness in achieving its goal.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of them. But the good news is, the real thing, there's one there.
Yeah.
When are they available here in Hawaii?
So I just got a message from my shipping company that mine will be arriving around the first week of April.
Yep. And then Japan?
Japan might even get there sooner because it takes less time to ship from the factory to Japan than it does to Maui.
Yep. And then
which always pisses me off because
yeah.
You see Tomo's photos of the new stuff and I don't have mine yet.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
Then in Australia, I think we're late April is our landing, I think, because it takes longer for us.
So the bus goes through Japan first and then to Maui and then on down to Australia.
No, it goes back across the top and then it goes down WA and around and then back up. And I tracked the ship on the last container. I was like, why are you going that way?
Yeah.
So, someone actually asked me, can they drop my boards at WA? I'm like, they're not going to stop a ship and take your container out and pick your board.
Exactly.
So I think we'll wrap up this segment here. There will be another segment on the boards only, but hopefully that answers a lot of questions. Or I've been saying it for days now. If I was good at editing, I'd get that myth busted sticker, not myth busters, like myth busted. Boom. So thanks for your time. I think we covered a lot of really solid points in there that are going to answer a lot of questions and hopefully guide people into the right board. So thank you.
My pleasure. Always. I mean, I love foiling. I love talking about foiling. I love designing foil boards, and so it's always a pleasure to sit down and have a real conversation about it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.